This is the last in my series of video lessons about IELTS Speaking Part 2. I've already done lessons about the 6 main topic areas for IELTS Speaking Part 2. This list describes a person, place, object, event, activity and your favourites. We've covered those, but what about questions that don't fit into these 6 main topic areas? What do you do if you have a question that doesn't seem to be one of these 6 main areas? Let's have a look at some examples to show you what I mean. Here are some questions that I've seen in official IELTS books or in the real exam. 1. Describe an important choice that you had to make. Describe an idea you had for improving something at work or college. Describe a competition that you took part in. Describe a meeting that you went to at work, college or school. Describe a time when you were asked for your opinion in a survey. These 5 don't seem necessarily to fit into the 6 main topic areas, but there are more. Here are 5 more. Number 6. Describe a journey that you remember well. 7. Describe an open air or street market that you enjoyed visiting. Describe a shop near where you live that you sometimes use. Describe a conflict that you had or a time when you became angry. Describe a beautiful sky that you enjoyed looking at. And 5 more. Number 11. Describe an interesting story that someone told you. Describe a law in your country that you think is good. Describe a local news story that people in your area found interesting. Describe a time when you were stuck in traffic or delayed when travelling. And describe a time when you helped someone. So we've got 15 questions there that I've picked from different sources that don't seem to fit in the 6 main topic areas. So let's look at what we should do in this situation. Here's my advice. I think there are 3 things that you can do. First, you can adapt your ideas from a main topic. Even if some of those questions didn't seem to be from one of the 6 main topics straight away, often you can use one of the main topics, or you can adapt your ideas at least. If you've prepared some good vocabulary for the main topics, I'm sure you'll be able to use some of it for almost any question. The second thing that you could do is talk about your job or studies. I think apart from the 6 topic areas, the main ones, we should really have a 7th one. Number 7 would be your preparation for your job or studies. You should be able to describe either your job or your studies. It depends what you do. You definitely should be able to describe your career, what you do in life. I can't help so much with that because it depends on the person, it depends what you do, but you should definitely prepare some good ideas, good vocabulary for that topic or those topics. And finally, the third thing that you could do is look through the lessons on my blog. Often I cover the stranger topics, the different ones that people are worried about on my blog in the lessons there. Let's look at each one of these 3 tips in a bit more detail. The first tip again, adapt your ideas from a main topic. Well, from those 15 questions that we've just seen that seem like they're not about a main topic, let's see if we can find a main topic that's close to them. So the question about describing a competition that you've been in, we could choose a sports competition and use our ideas from the activity topic. My sport was swimming, so I could easily say that I was in a swimming competition maybe when I was younger. Another one of those questions that we've just seen, the 15 questions, if it was describe a journey, well, I would use the main topic, describe a place. Of course, when you go on a journey, you're going to a place, so I could talk about the journey going there. I might have to add some ideas about the actual journey, but I can also talk about the destination, why I was going on that journey. You'll definitely be able to use some of your vocabulary from the describe a place topic for that one. The next one, describe a shop Well, you could easily use some ideas from your main topic area of describe an object. Whatever object you chose, I chose a watch. I could talk about the shop where I bought that watch. Or I could choose from my describe a favourite topic area. I did or mentioned describing a favourite book. We could talk about a bookshop where you've bought these books. Describe a beautiful sky. Well, I've written about this on my blog. You can just describe a place. I chose to describe London for my describe a place topic, and I could easily change that into a description of a sky. Perhaps I was up on a tall building looking out over the view of the city, and I can use my vocabulary about London for that. The next one, describe a story. Well, it would be a story that you told or that somebody told you. It could be an event. That could be just a story of what happened at a wedding. If you described a celebration, for example, a wedding or a birthday party, well, that's a story. You could say that you told someone about a wedding you went to, about a birthday party you went to. You could use the event topic, or if you've got an interesting description of a person, perhaps a famous person, your story could be about the life of that person. You could adapt your ideas there. Next example, a local news story. Well, talk about a place, something that happened in that place, or perhaps an event like a concert this time. Maybe there was a concert in your local area. We did a description of a concert in one of the other video lessons, so I've prepared that and got some good ideas for that already. Another one, if you're stuck in traffic or delayed, well, it's a bit like the journey topic. You're going to a place, so you could talk about why you were going there. Use all of the description of the place, and then just add some of the ideas for the traffic or delay on the journey. Finally, a time when you helped people. Well, you could say that you gave someone directions in a place or gave someone advice about which place to visit, and I would choose London again. I could use my description of London, say that maybe I advised a tourist to go there or gave someone directions to a place in London. Or I could talk about an object. Maybe I helped someone in my family to learn to use their new phone or their new watch, their smartwatch. I could use my description of an object from that main topic. So those are some of the 15 questions I showed you earlier where I think you could adapt ideas from main topics. The main topics in red writing on this slide. Now on to the second tip, which was to talk about your job or studies. This should be a strong topic for everyone. You should be able to talk about either your job or what you've studied at school, college, university. Thinking back to the 15 questions that I showed you earlier, let's see which of them could be answered using a description of your job or studies. The first one, an important choice in life that you made. If you have to describe it, an important choice of course, your choice of job or what to study could be perfect for that. Next one, an idea that you had at work or college. Of course, you could talk about your work or your studies for that. Describe a competition. We've already seen how you could adapt ideas, describing a sport, but maybe you could describe an academic type competition or a work competition, some kind of targets at work maybe. That might suit some people better than speaking about a sport. Next one, describe a meeting, of course, at work or at school, university. Lots of meetings, it would be easy to talk about your job or studies for that one. Describe a survey. Well, on most academic courses, for example at university, teachers ask their students to fill in a survey at the end of the course to see if they were satisfied with the course, what was the teaching like, what was the subject like, what were the facilities like. The same thing could be true in a job situation. Maybe at the end of a project you have a survey to see how everyone did, or if you go to a conference or a meeting, they often ask you to fill in a survey about the conference venue, the facilities, etc., to see if you're happy with the experience. So you could talk about work or studies for a survey question. Next one, a conflict or a time you became angry. Well, maybe it was part of a group work project, a team project, and you could actually use some vocabulary from the describe a person topic as well, because we talked about hard work, working as a team, that kind of thing. Maybe you were with someone on a team who didn't work hard, who didn't contribute properly. So use some of your vocabulary from the describe a person topic and think about a situation at work or during your studies where you worked in a team and it didn't go very well. Another question that could be covered by this job or studies description: describe a time when you were stuck in traffic or delayed. Maybe you were travelling to an interview or a meeting or an exam at school or university. You could talk about where you were going when you were stuck in traffic or delayed and how you felt, how stressful it was, etc. Another one, when you helped someone. Describe a time when you helped someone. Maybe you were working in a team at university or school or in your job and you help one of the other team members. Use some of your vocabulary from the describe a person topic again when we were talking about teamwork and working hard. So you can see that it's important to prepare some good ideas and vocabulary about your job or studies. These topics can cover a lot of possible questions. Finally, the third of my tips, look through the lessons on my blog. I've covered a lot of speaking topics on IELTSSimon.com. Just go to the blog IELTS-Simon.com and look through the speaking lessons. You'll find all sorts of examples of some of the stranger topics as well as the 6 main topic areas. For example, I've covered the topic describe an open air or street market. Describe a law in your country. I think I said or recommended talking about not using a mobile phone while driving. Choose an easy law for that one. Or not smoking in restaurants, for example. Another one that I've covered, an environment problem, a business you'd like to own, a prize that you'd like to win, etc. I've covered many lessons. Go through the speaking lessons and find as many as you can. But remember, the 6 main topic areas are still the most important. You can look at these less common ones, but it's still more important to be really familiar and prepared for the 6 most common ones. In the end, if none of this advice works, well, do your best. And my advice is tell the truth. If you can tell a real story about your life, something, you can describe something that you've really done, it's always easier if you're telling the truth. That's the end of this lesson, and it's the end of the series of lessons about IELTS Speaking Part 2. In the next lesson, we'll move on to Speaking Part 3. In this lesson, I'm going to give you some advice for IELTS Speaking Part 3. Part 3 of the test, but also at the end of this lesson I'll give you a summary of advice for all 3 parts of the speaking test. So first let's start with IELTS Speaking Part 3. You'll get between 3 and 6 questions in this part of the test, and you should try to give long, detailed answers. The examiner's listening to see if you can give good answers with lots of explanation, and it's also an opportunity to show how good your English language is. It's your final chance to impress the examiner, remember. So most people are tired by this time in the exam day, right at the end of the day, but you need to make one final effort to do well in Speaking Part 3 and impress the examiner. Leave a good impression at the end of the exam. So Speaking Part 3 can be a secret to just making that final improvement in your score, maybe getting the score you need if you do well in this part. We need a method to do well in Speaking Part 3, and I'm going to suggest that you follow 3 steps, or maybe 4. There's a 4th step that we can add. And if you follow these steps, you'll ensure that you've given a good, detailed, quite long answer. Force yourself to follow the steps, because otherwise, if you don't, your answers won't have direction. In part 3 of the speaking test, many people just give one answer, one idea, and they keep going round and round the same idea. They don't say anything new. They repeat themselves too much. If you follow a step-by-step structure in your answer will move forward. It won't go round and round repeating, so you'll have direction in your answer, which is what we want. Let's look at the steps now then. The first step, when the examiner asks you a question in part 3, is to answer that question directly. So you need to give an answer. Try and use a full sentence instead of just a one-word answer. Answer the question directly. Then explain your answer, give your reasons, give some detail. Ask yourself why in your head. Keep thinking why, and give more detail by answering that question why. Then move on to the third step. Give an example. Try to give a personal example, a real-life example. Talk about your country, your family, you yourself. Any type of example. Force yourself to say those 2 key words, for example. As soon as you say those 2 words, for example, your mind has to think quickly and give any example that comes into your head. You don't have time to plan. Just say those 2 words and do your best to give an example. And then finally, if you want to give an even longer answer, and if it's possible, the 4th step could be to explain the opposite or an alternative to your answer. And we can use an if sentence for this. What would happen if? You'll see an example of that in a moment. Let's look at an example of a question in Speaking Part 3 and my answer following the 4 steps. This comes from one of my blog lessons from IELTSSimon.com. So you may have seen this before, but I think it's a good example to use. Here's the question. Do you think that it's better to have clear aims for the future, or is it best to take each day as it comes? So this is an either-or question. Should we have clear aims for the future or live day by day? So what I'll do now is follow the steps. You'll see me follow the 4 steps to give a long, detailed answer. I'm not worrying too much about vocabulary or grammar. My main focus is on going through the steps and saying what I can. So step 1, answer the question directly. Here's my answer. I think it's best to have a good idea of what you want to do with your life, especially in terms of studies and career. So I'm saying I think it's better to have clear aims, a good idea of what you want to do. Now let's explain why. Step 2, explain your answer with reasons. Having aims allows you to plan what you need to do today and tomorrow in order to achieve longer-term objectives. That's my simple reason. And step 3, the example of this. For example, if you want to become a doctor, you need to choose the right subjects at school, get the right exam results, and work hard at university. Simple example using a common career that many students are going for, a doctor. And notice that I use the 2 key words, for example. That forces me to give a real example of this. The final step is to give an alternative or opposite. So what if we didn't have a clear aim for the future? What would happen then? Without a clear aim, it would be impossible to take the necessary steps towards a career in medicine or any other profession. So that's my model answer for a good, long, detailed answer in part 3 of the speaking test. You don't need the 4th step, the opposite, for every question, for every answer, but it's nice to have it sometimes. The key is the first 3 steps. Give an answer, explain why, give an example. Now there's some good vocabulary in that answer and the grammar is correct, but I wasn't really focusing on vocabulary or grammar. My main focus is to answer the question well, to give a long answer that has good direction that moves forward because I'm going through the steps. So let's make a note of what's important. My main focus is on my answer structure, following the steps, not on vocabulary or grammar. Why? Because my priority is to give a long, detailed answer. We don't really have time to think of good words or grammar, but hopefully if you're giving a long answer, it will contain some good vocabulary. You're forcing yourself to speak more, so hopefully you're going to use some good words, and your grammar focus should just be on not making mistakes. Don't have in your head complex structures that you're trying to use. If you're thinking about grammar, you're going to go away from the answer. Your priority, your focus should be on giving a good answer. To see more examples of Speaking Part 3 answers, do a Google search for my website and you'll find lots of examples there. Here's how to do a Google search that only searches my website, IELTSSimon.com. So put the search terms Speaking Part 3 and then the word site, IELTSSimon.com with no spaces between site, and IELTS. Just write it exactly as it is written here on this slide and you'll find the search results from my website only for all of my Speaking Part 3 lessons, and you can go through lots of lessons there, see more examples of how I answer using the 3 or 4 steps that I've shown you here. Now, moving on, let's summarize all 3 parts of the speaking test, the advice for all 3 parts. Let's start then with part 1, and my main advice for part 1 is this. Focus on fluency. Try not to hesitate, try to answer quickly, and use short, simple answers. We give an answer and we give a reason and stop. But your main focus is on fluency, trying to give an answer straight away. This part of the test is supposed to be easy, so give short, simple answers. In part 2, we have a different focus completely. We're focusing on good vocabulary ideas, so it's a vocabulary focus. We've looked at preparing for the 6 main topic areas. You can prepare really good vocabulary using themes and examples as I've shown in my lessons, and if you go into the exam with some good vocabulary prepared, that can really help your score. On the other hand, what we've just seen in this lesson, in part 3, we've got a different focus again. Focus on structure. Answer, explain, example, and maybe an alternative. This forces you, as I said, to give a longer answer with more detail, and that's the key thing in this part of the test. The only part of this test where we can really stop and think and prepare some ideas, some good vocabulary, is part 2. In parts 1 and 3, you don't have time to think, you don't have time to prepare, so it's best to focus on quick answers in part 1 and on this step-by-step structure in part 3. So that's my advice for the speaking test, and this is the last lesson. In the next lesson, we'll move on to IELTS listening.